Hello. On the World Today, we're going to talk to a Nigerian scholar at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, Ata Barkindo, to discuss his country, to discuss the political situation there, to discuss the history, the culture, the memory of the Nigerian people. The recent elections that took place in Nigeria saw the defeat of the incumbent, Goodluck Jonathan, and his replacement by a former military dictator now dressed in civilian garb and returning to power once again at the head of a political party. One of Nigeria's greatest singers of the 70s and 80s in particular was Fela Kuti, whose portrait adorns this studio today. Fela Kuti spoke for one Nigeria. For him, the unity of Nigeria, whether Muslim or Christian, was of great importance. And he put his neck out more than once, singing radical, subversive songs that challenged the Nigerian establishment, regardless of whether it was from the north or the south. Fela was from Lagos, the largest city in Nigeria, the most vibrant culturally in many ways, and producing some of the finest intellectuals that country has produced before and after independence from Britain. Ata, welcome to our program.
Thank you.
What does Fela Kuti, who is no longer with us, symbolize for you as a person?
This is very, very interesting because Fela ran and lived his life during the time of the military dictatorship, particularly in Nigeria. And that was the period where to speak truth to power, you must have to risk your life. So in a way, Fela represented so many things. He was able to connect a lot with young people. He was able to speak the truth to power. He was able to speak on behalf of the voiceless. And he was able to tell the military, look, we need liberation, we need freedom, not just freedom of expression, but we need to represent a kind of opposition that will, monitor what exactly military dictators at that time or anybody at all in power that was doing. So, and I think in a way, Fela, represented the aspirations of the Nigerian people, the younger generation, who wanted to see a united Nigeria, a Nigeria that has a lot of equality and justice.
Before we started interviewing you, you were telling me that you were born to Muslim parents in the north, but then they converted to Catholicism, so you are now a Catholic. How did this happen?
So my father wanted a Western kind of education. So he got attracted by the missionary education offered by the Irish missionaries in northern Nigeria. So he joined them as the houseboy. Then he now married my mother, who was a Muslim, and then both of them converted from Islam and became Catholics. So I was born as a young boy. I never had shoes. I sat under the tree. I never had a classroom across my head. I didn't have a book or a pencil or a pen to write. I wrote on the ground with a stick. We were taught in the local language. I only started learning English when I came to the missionary school. And eventually I trained to be a Catholic priest. But because of the violence between Christians and Muslims in northern Nigeria, my bishop sent me to Egypt to study Arabic language. And in Egypt, I lived in a slum, a place called Shobra. They call it Karib, means Cinema Dolly. It's a very famous place in Egypt. I lived there for 2 years, studying Arabic language at Zamalek. Then after that, I came to Rome in 2009, and I did a master's program in political history of Islam. So when I finished in 2011, I was accepted as SOAS to do a master's degree in conflict and transitional justice with regards to West Africa and a case study of Nigeria. So when I finished, I now started a PhD on history, memory, and resistance in northern Nigeria with Boko Haram as my case study.
Before we come to Boko Haram, talk to me about the recent transition. It's obvious that people throughout the country were fed up with Goodluck Jonathan's policies, the scale of corruption, the amount of money that was being taken out of the country and put in, offshore islands. All this had been going on. Not just, he's not the only one who did that. His predecessors did the same. This wealth that Nigeria had accumulated through oil was never really used to benefit the people. It was used to benefit the elite. And that is what elite politics in Nigeria, whether Muslim or Christian, have represented. Or have I got it wrong?
You are absolutely right. Nigeria is a classic case of tragedy. The country is so rich, not just in resources, but human resources. The amount of young people, the number of young people, the country is so vibrant, but the election and the voting out of Jonathan is simply a case waiting to happen. It is not just about Jonathan. It is about the fact that people were fed up with the ruling party, PDP, because Nigeria went through a terrible period of military dictatorship where money was stolen, people were killed, no one was accountable. Biafra, impunity. Even we look at all the transitional and post-conflict reconstruction, efforts that have been made. No one has been compensated. Nothing happens. So when the PDP, the ruling party, came back to multi-party democracy in 1999, there was so much expectations. But when Obasanjo came to power for 8 years, nothing happened. The PDP now brought up Yar'Adua. Nothing happened. Then Jonathan, again, the same case continued. So it was not just that people were fed up with Jonathan. People were completely fed up with the ruling party. And that is why it is not surprising that Jonathan had been voted out. And I want you to also know, I'm not happy because Jonathan has been voted out or Buhari has been voted in. I'm simply happy because the typical Nigerian voter has rediscovered what we call his swagger, that now his vote can count. And for me, that is what matters. And secondly, for 16 years, for one party to be in power, I think that is too long. We don't want the dictatorship of one-party system.
And what do you think of the new president?
I was fortunate to be in his house. I tried to interview him. I was not able to in Kaduna. I think that people have accused him a lot, particularly when he was a dictator, so to say. But he was just a dictator for 20 months. But I remember very well in 1983-84 when he was in power. Every Saturday we cleaned the streets. Nigerians line up. There was a little bit of decency. People knew that there was a rule of law. You cannot break the law and go away with it. I'm not a supporter of the APC, but Buhari as a person, I think I admire his integrity. Remember, he contested 3 times, he lost. He never gave up on the Nigerian people. Okay. And I say he didn't come to power because he wanted money. So we wait to see when he works, then we judge him on that. But I think we have a lot of expectation on him. Because of his integrity, we want him to transfer that integrity onto the Nigerian system. So we will see what will happen. But I think that we hope he's going to do a lot of things.
Well, we can hope, but basically the crisis in Nigeria, the social crisis, the crisis of everyday life for most of its citizens, is peaked. It's at a very high level. I mean, we ask the same questions in Africa, in Asia, in Europe even, in many parts of the country. Are the people going to have access to free education, a free health system, subsidized housing, or is society going to carry on like before? This will be a test to a certain extent.
I think in Nigeria we have this proverb. It's a local proverb that says, when the load is heavy for the donkey, even the donkey can bite. I think that there is no way Nigeria will continue. Business can no longer be usual. People are becoming very much aware, particularly through social media. They are seeing what is happening in other parts of the world, and they are really, really asking questions. With all our riches and wealth, why can't we be like the UK, like America, like Singapore? So I don't think that business is going to be as usual. But we don't expect one single Nigerian to turn the tide around. It has to be a collaboration, not just between Buhari and the political class, but even Nigerians as ordinary people. In the local offices they work, they should also, get away from this idea of corruption and bribery, not just waiting for the government, but even at the local level, even at the family level. I don't want to be too moralistic about this issue, but at the end of the day, even the international community has to come in. We accuse Nigerian political elite of corruption, but when they steal the money, where do they keep it? In Swiss banks, where it is claimed
and
that
on the Virgin Islands, which is the City of London
HSBC banks there in the UK.
Yeah.
So if the international community can help us to say, look, when you bring in this money, we're not going to accept them. Take them back to Nigeria. That will help. So it has to be a form of collaboration. But the corporate organizations, the big businesses, will they accept to do that? Because they also want to make profit. And that is very, very normal with a capitalist system of governance where it is all about profit. It is all about gain. And the dignity of the human person probably sometimes does not matter.
I mean, I agree. And from what you're saying, basically you're expressing a hope that there will be the young, especially, who are a majority in the country. I think 60 or 70% of the people are under 30. That these young people will create social movements demanding change.
The civil society in Nigeria is growing and it has to grow. And then number two, we have to really make our leaders to be accountable. It's absolutely very, very important.
Athar, let us come to the stranglehold now, which religion has acquired, both in the North and the South, that in the late 80s, especially, and early 90s, there was a huge vacuum created in many parts of the world. Religiosity grew, in the United States as well, by the way. It's not just exclusive to Africa. But in Nigeria, you had a big growth of Christian revivalist groups, Pentecostal groups in the South, and political Islam, Sharia groups in the North. How do you explain this development?
I think I will first of all link this development to state failure. When the state has failed to provide basic necessities to its citizens, they have to turn somewhere. And that is why, for example, in the South, you find out churches are really exploding. As we say in Nigeria, the number of churches can only be compared to the number of filling stations you find along the road. Petrol stations. So you find churches almost everywhere. Why? Because it is a big business. It is a highly big business. And it grows in an area where really there's a lot of poverty. So people now, turn to God for everything. I'm not saying that people should not turn to God. I'm not saying people should not pray to God. But if you look at the level of religiosity, both even the political Islam in the North and the number of churches exploding in the South, and then you compare that to the level of morality and corruption, then you find out what kind of religion are we practicing? What kind of religious values? So I think one of the things is that the political class has to sit up and provide basic necessities to its people. I think that the international community too, probably the other international countries could come in the sense that a lot of Nigerians visit Mecca on annual basis for pilgrimage. And the government doesn't know. Who do they meet when they go on pilgrimage? What type of groups, Islamic groups, do they meet? Do they receive funding? Do they receive money, financial support to build Islamic schools in areas where government has failed to build schools? When you talk of Christianity in the South, how many Christian churches get lots of support from America to build Christian hospitals, to build Christian schools in areas where government has failed? And that is why you remember the Muslim Brotherhood sometime in Egypt became very, very strong. They were able to provide social amenities that the government has actually, failed to provide. So in a way, it's a similar thing that has happened. For example, in my village, a village of barely about 2,000 people, you need to see the gigantic mosque that has been built. typically the people of that village cannot get the money. So certainly this money must be coming from somewhere. And that's why after the Iranian Revolution 1979, the kind of financial support Iran gives to Nigeria has increased tremendously. And the reason is that the Shia Islamic group is really growing in Nigeria, particularly in places like Zaria.
But let's now come to the specific issue of Boko Haram, which, as you know, has got enormous amount of publicity in the West because of the kidnapping of young women. It's regarded as one of the sort of most horrific organizations within the Islamic world in Africa compared to ISIS, Al-Qaeda, etc. What are the origins of Boko Haram? How did it develop?
You know, when you come to northern Nigeria, there are lots of extremists, not violent, but extremist, intolerant Islamic sects littered all around. They start as a social movement, non-violent group, preaching and teaching, and they have mobile vans with loudspeakers moving around. This was exactly how Boko Haram started. And they were growing in numbers, and they were becoming like an electoral, significant, they can really make a significant change in any election. So the governor of Borno State, Sharif, at that time, who wanted to be governor, appealed to them. You vote me, and I allow you to fully implement Sharia.
That was the deal.
That was the deal. So they actually mobilized and voted, and he even appointed one of them to be like on the committee for the Sharia implementation, which was Yusuf, the late leader. But eventually, the governor could not fully implement Sharia because it was not possible. The whole of Borno, there are substantial, number of Christians, both in the capital and on the fringes. So there was no way he could fully implement Sharia. So the group was very, very bitter, and they withdrew from Borno to Kayama in Yobe State. They set up their own schools. They only taught Arabic, and they were speaking English, and they were really becoming a threat to the security of the state. So the governor now appealed to the federal government, which was Obasanjo. And the reason was that within the Nigerian constitution, it's only the president, the federal government, that can order the police and the military when there's a conflict anywhere. So now they ordered for the soldiers, and in 2009, they descended on these people. They brutally killed their leader. His hand was handcuffed. It's all over the YouTube, He was killed. And what happened? His commanders dispersed. Some went to Somalia, others went to Algeria, others went to Mali. They trained, they were more radicalized, they regrouped, and they came back to Nigeria with one of the most violent, radical extremists I've ever seen or heard, Abubakar Shekau, who led the group in a new way in 2010. So he even moved, he shifted the grievances of the group from the domestic level to an international kind of jihadism, where he now wanted to collaborate with Al-Qaeda, and even recently he had an alliance, with the Islamic State in Iraq, asking for support. And they had legitimate grievances to take. And what do I mean by that? The name of this group is called Boko Haram. Boko, if you translate it, it means Western, education, something that is...
And Haram forbidden.
And Haram is forbidden. Why would they say Western education is forbidden?
That's the name of the group.
Yeah. The reason why they say that is that those who govern Nigeria do so using certificates from Western education system, using democracy. But all that it has been promoting since Nigeria's independence in 1960 is corruption, injustice. So their thinking is, if Western education will bring corruption and injustice, then it's haram. Let us look for an alternative system that will eliminate corruption, that will eliminate injustice. And that alternative system should be Sharia law, should be Sharia governance. This, for me, is a legitimate kind of grievance. The only problem is the method through which they implement and execute. There was no need for them to kill innocent civilians.
But look, all these groups which you have mentioned, Al-Qaeda, grew out of the United States war in Afghanistan. The Saudis sent fighters there to help the Americans, and when the war against the Russians was over, Al-Qaeda became what it now is. Obama, the American president, said just a few weeks ago that the Islamic State, ISIS as it's known, was created because we invaded Iraq. Before that, they didn't exist. So this is the American president admitting that a US war has created this group. Now you are saying that brutalities by the state in Nigeria triggered off a new development within a traditional conservative Islamist organization which sent it on its path. Then we read just last week that the United States are now planning a huge military presence in virtually in every major United States country. AFRICOM had a meeting with 13 other Western nations involved to secure to defend what they call the security of Africa against terrorism, probably in reality to tell the Chinese, we are watching. You can be here economically, but not militarily. But this is the situation. Now, is there a way out of it, in your opinion?
I think there is a way out of this. One of the ways is that of regional cooperation. Because if I went to where the area that Boko Haram operates is at the Lake Chad border region, you have to know that at this region, it was a flourishing Islamic empire, the Kanem Borno Empire. And this empire was literally divided when it was taken over by the French, the Germans, and the British. And up to today, you have this kind of spillover colonial alliances and grievances. And the Nigerian government didn't collaborate very, very much with its neighbors. After the girls were kidnapped, they couldn't even meet in Africa. They had to go to Paris in order to sit down and talk. So they had their own underground, kind of politics that actually derailed that kind of military collaboration. The reason why I say this is that at the moment, most of the Boko Haram territories have been retaken, but the girls have not been found. That means they are not within Nigerian territory. They probably have crossed over, either into Chad, Niger, or Cameroon. Then the other issue is that there must be a massive economic master plan for the whole of the Northeast. It is the most neglected region. I grew up there, and I know what the people of that region up to today go through. Power and resources is highly concentrated in Abuja. It hardly reaches the fringes. And even when it does, it has to come through the politicians. And it trickles down, and then nothing happens. So when you don't put all these things together, it's going to be very, very difficult. With the multitude of young people we have, particularly in northern Nigeria. Young people have graduated for the past 10 years. They have no job. They come back home and rely on the very salary of their parents that trained them in the university in the first place. You cannot have this kind of young people and you allow them to litter the streets. You are asking for trouble.
I mean, the picture you paint is, of course, very depressing on one level. It is, at the same time, a global picture. I carry on saying this because people have to understand that it's at a very extreme level in Africa. But, you can see countries in Europe where there's huge unemployment now. Greece, Spain, Italy, Portugal. Even here, it's disguised, but it exists. France, very, very high levels of employment. Of course, their economies were initially on a higher level, whereas in Nigeria, the economy never really took off. But tell me something. When oil was discovered in Nigeria, and there were huge possibilities, there were intellectuals in the oil-rich regions, and others, and social movements. Ken Saro-Wiwa, for instance, the writer who was hanged by the military government for daring to demand rights to that oil on behalf of the people. So it's not that people haven't struggled. They have struggled before, but they have been repressed. So state repression, leave aside against Boko Haram or many other groups, or the Biafrans before that, but state repression against people who challenge the state monopoly is brutal, and that is a huge difference with other parts of the world.
But I think that for almost every successful country, you have to really reach a stage where you have to speak truth to power, where you really have to challenge. If you don't cross that, then it's going to be very, very difficult. And when oil was discovered in Nigeria, for example, in 1956, you are right. There are people who really spoke. But you have to understand that in 1956, almost all the rights of oil exploration and production was by the British.
Yes.
By BP and Shell. When Nigeria came back to independence, the federal government tried to rewrite the rules. And that is when the Americans, the Japanese, and now the Chinese, have really come in. And if you go down to the Niger Delta, you cannot believe it. The level of, environmental degradation and the level of deprivation for the ordinary people. So it is not just about the repression of the Nigerian government. It is also about the collaborative repressiveness between the Nigerian government and the multinational corporations and the way they explore the oil in the Niger Delta. Some of the things they do there, they cannot do it maybe in Switzerland or in America or here in the UK. But because in Nigeria, for example, in certain areas, the rule of law does not take place. And that's why some of these companies are able to bribe and then have their way through.
So the problem is a global problem.
It is a global problem. There's no way we can produce our oil and consume it ourselves. We need international market for this oil to be sold. And also because we lack the infrastructure. So we need the international community in that sense, the multinational corporations, to come and help. So I think that the wisest thing the Nigerian government can do is to put these acts together and then ensure that the rule of law, carries its course.
Huge unemployment, very little for people to do in the countryside or the small towns, and everyone goes to the big city, Lagos. This is the magnet, regardless of whether there are jobs there or not. Informal networks, drugs, many of these things, they fuel these huge populations with very little resources for ordinary people. So if you go to Lagos, there's a rich sector with guards, armed guards defending the houses of the rich. Rich communities live protected in a bubble completely cut off from 90%, if not more, of the city. So these are like cauldrons bubbling away, and sooner or later there will be explosions.
It's not only in Lagos. The new one is in Abuja, the capital city, the seat of power. If you look at, for example, the housing in Abuja, Abuja is simply an artificial life. It shows you the greed of the Nigerian elite. Within the Abuja city, most of the houses are empty because the ordinary workers cannot pay for these houses. So when you go to the fringes around Abuja, in places like Inyanya, for example, no toilet system, no road, no water, no electricity. Thousands of people, they are coming from their own villages, coming to settle because they want to have the crumb that falls from the master's table. But one of the other social issues that is being created is that when people move from their villages to settle, that is no integration. People settle according to their ethnic groups, which creates a kind of a very serious problem because when there is a conflict, already the group is identifiable. It becomes a target immediately. So you go to places like Jos or Benue State or Kaduna, which is also their states close to Abuja. The way people are settling, Christians settle differently from Muslims. Muslims settle differently from Christians. If you go to Jos, you find neighborhoods and settlements that are called Jerusalem or Afghanistan or Karbala. This becomes obvious targets, especially when there's an uprising or there's a conflict.
On that note, we must end this discussion. It's been wonderful talking to you, and we will discuss again, I hope, before too long. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. See you another time.
Yeah.
Thank you.